We are back with more NBA coverage, and in this one, there's a little bit of everything that went down in the general NBA landscape over this period of time. You had some gratifying moments for a few people, some very interesting developments coming along. There's a little bit of solemnity within a couple of things that happen here, and then there's also just an incredibly disgusting one as well. But to get straight into it, we start off with a decent pickup by the Kings. They would sign Drew Eubanks earlier in the week, last week, and you know, from their standpoint, it does make sense. Losing Jonas Valanciunas is tough. You know, as a starting caliber center in some respects, Drew Eubanks isn't going to come in and serve that kind of position for you, but I guess with Saric also not being a person that does get a lot of playing time anymore, like, as long as you can have Drew Eubanks hold down the fort for at least this season, you're in a good spot to rebuild that depth in that 5 spot in the front court. Because, I mean, they drafted Maxime Renault in the draft, which I thought was a smart pick. And seeing as he's a young center, I don't think the Kings want to cast him into the fire so quickly. So to have someone at least just take on the mantle for a little bit won't hurt. And then you can have Renault. Like, honestly, Eubanks, there will be situations where I think Eubanks will start games, but Renault will end up logging more minutes because that's just kind of the potential he has displayed at Stanford and through the draft combine. You know, Eubanks is a solid replacement in respects. I mean, he's not going to be a game breaker for them, but at the very least, he'll provide them with solid minutes no matter where he plays at, whether he's a starter or whether he's just a rotational piece off the bench. I mean, last season he only started 4 total games, split between 2 teams. So I don't know. But the biggest thing here would be age. Like, Valanciunas was not performing the greatest with the squad, and he was nearing, like, that age for the centers where they just start to wear down completely. I mean, he'll be going on 34 next year. Meanwhile, Drew Eubanks is only like 28 years old. So, while it's not in the general sense of truly great difference in age at the same time in NBA terms, you're much better off being in the spot that Drew Eubanks is in while being 28 years old rather than being on the wrong side of 30, as Valanciunas currently is now. I don't expect the production to be high for him, but again, just having a solid piece if you're the Kings, and also in doing that, if Eubanks starts, you allow Domantas Sabonis to continue to play at the 4 rather than the 5, where he's excelled the most throughout his career. So it kind of opens up that space as well. Again, I don't think it's a game-changing move, but for what they need after moving on from Valanciunas and not having Saric be a usable piece at this stage of his career either, having Eubanks on a short-term contract like this won't do any damage to them. Last week, the Wizards would trade Kelly Olynyk to the Spurs in exchange for Malaki Branham, Blake Wesley, and a 2026 second-rounder. Again, I thought he was going to be a solid fit with the Wizards, but again, they have a clear direction. They want to keep things relatively young, at least in certain aspects of their team, despite having the likes of Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart, which is why I don't understand it. Like, Kelly Olynyk's not a bad player for what he can provide for that team, but I guess they just got sick and tired of him, and they decided to ship him on to the Spurs. Now, the Spurs had recently acquired Luke Kornet at this point, and Kelly Olynyk, as a player who will likely play the 4 because of how tall Luke Kornet is. Either way, that just adds yet another dimension to the Spurs team. I like the move. We know what he is at this point. He's continuing to get up there in age, but he can still, as I detailed in the last sequence of a trade involving him, right? He can still stretch the floor like fucking crazy. One of the more efficient players from deep last season. And to get that in a bench role on a team in the Spurs that all last season struggled to really find consistency from that range of the floor. Like, that is pretty elite stuff. Like, it just reinforces the notion that they're genuinely trying to make something out of this season. I don't know about win a championship. I don't know about winning one immediately, but at the very least, like a deeper playoff run and legitimate playoff contention for at least this season appears to be the goal with the kinds of moves that they're setting up, and also just the talent that they already have. And we understand that they're going to continue to get better. Apparently, Keldon Johnson is still listed as a player on their depth chart. I do continue to question if anything is going to happen to him or not, but at the same time, again, given how young Keldon Johnson is and the fact that he can play either wing position, if they do decide to keep him after this move, which to this point they still have, again, there are so many different lineups that they can deploy. If they want to line up out there for spacing the floor, you're going to have Olynyk next to Wemby. And you're probably going to have Vasilije out there as well. If you want to go tall, they could realistically do that too, having Wembanyama play the small forward position. Think about how much of a mismatch that would be. Because I'm sure Olynyk could play the 4 or the 5. You'd have Kornet as a core 5, and then you could just have lineups with goddamn Wembanyama at the 3. Or maybe even the point guard position at times, because Sochan is still a part of this roster too. The Spurs are just going to be a very interesting and all the same exciting team next season. And to add Olynyk to the mix of this, an established veteran who knows his role and isn't going to command much attention on the offensive front when it comes to getting him touches and having like a decent usage rate, you're not going to have to worry about him with that at all. Because he's just in there to stick to his role, and he does it so effectively. So I don't have a problem with that from the Spurs perspective. But to move on to the Wizards side of things, it makes sense for Branham and Wesley to get sent away from the Spurs in this time, because I'm not going to say that either of them are bad players, although Branham, when he did get games in, he showed me a lot of inconsistencies that I was very, very hesitant about. But at the same time, we're asking a person who came into the league at the age of 19 to try to gain some traction with a Spurs team that was still reeling from just so much turmoil at that specific time in the aftermath of the trade that sent DeRozan to Chicago. Like, there was just a lot going on, and Branham was a victim of that all the same. But his opportunities since then, for a number of different reasons, you can attribute that to the way that they've drafted over the past few seasons and have acquired this new talent in the locker room, and also the shift in coaching. Obviously, Mitch Johnson is going to be taking over now, and he did effectively finish off the season for Greg Popovich last year after his unfortunate stroke. So there's going to be a shift in philosophy there. Honestly, in Branham's case especially, he suffered. He didn't start a single game last season and had some decent averages, but opportunity was fleeting for him. And as a young player who was still just 22 years old to this point, any change of scenery that he can get that could allow him to potentially realize a new role with a new team would not be a situation that he or the Spurs could pass up. Because if they just keep him, he's just going to rot there. Same thing with Blake Wesley, who also came in the league in the same draft class, is also 22 years old, and who also, while appearing in more games last season, did not start a single game and put up mostly career lows. So, recognizing that they are trying to undergo a completely different direction now, I mean, obviously the first couple of years of both of their careers were focused on rebuild, and even last year was to an extent, but they had better talent, and their moves at the trade deadline suggested that they're trying to undergo a shift. Like, the shooting guard position and guard positions in general are so stacked now. Like, you're bringing in guys like Dylan Harper as well through the draft. You got De'Aaron Fox at the trade deadline at the shooting guard and point guard positions respectively. You already have Stephon Castle, who won Rookie of the Year last year. So it's just getting clogged up over there, and all of those players serve as much better options for their timeline right now. So I can see why the Spurs would have to move on from them. Sending them both to the Wizards is going to be interesting. You would hope that they can break through, but at the same time, as bad as the Wizards are, even they are now in a position where their future in terms of their roster could be on the rise. I mean, they just drafted Trey Johnson III. They have Jameer Watkins as a guard forward potentially. You already have Marcus Smart there holding it down. You got CJ McCollum in the mix now. And you got AJ Johnson at the trade deadline as well. So I just I don't know. I do question if they can even find a roster spot here. And it's going to be tough in that way. Even Corey Kispert, who can play the guard forward position, is projected to come off the bench, and he's a much better player at this time than both of these two guys are. Even with him being a little older than both of them. Bub Carrington's also there. Kashawn George is more of a forward to me, even though he's listed as a guard. I mean, I will say that I cannot envision Marcus Smart or CJ McCollum signing second contracts with this team. And at the very least, both of them, along with, some of the other players on this team, could serve as mentors to the likes of Branham, of Wesley, and other young guards on this squad, looking to solidify their spots in the NBA and carve out fruitful careers for themselves. But it is clogged up with young, unproven talent. So while they may have a greater chance of breaking through and getting a legitimate role with the Wizards, it's still highly unlikely for them. But the Wizards, again, are in a spot where they're not making too many moves in one specific direction right now. So they can afford to take these players on. And to also get a 2026 second rounder back isn't bad either. I'll pair both of these up because honestly, it seemed like these two moves were inevitable. As last week, Chet Holmgren would sign a 5-year, $250 million contract extension, while Jalen Williams would sign a 5-year deal worth around $240 million, with the potential to increase to $287 million if he wins MVP, wins DPOY, or makes another All-NBA team, which he did that just last year. So there's no real core thing stopping him right now, barring anything unforeseen, from him doing that again, potentially, next year. As for both of the contracts in general, they're both heavily deserved. Both of them. Like, even with SGA being the headliner, there's no secret that the trio of him, Holmgren, and Jalen Williams had a spectacular year together, and they capped it off in the best way imaginable. It was only a matter of time before the Thunder front office would try to lock up all three of them for the foreseeable future. Like I did state in the video where I detailed SGA's extension, obviously, with having all of these three massive contract extensions on your bill now, they are certainly in danger of crossing the second apron threshold in just a short amount of time. But again, they are willing, more than willing, to eat every single penalty that comes with it. Because to lock all three of them up in one fell swoop shows that they are in it for the long haul no matter what. And again, they still have a boatload of resources that will not be hindered at all by making these deals. At the very least, for next season, they're still going to be mostly intact. Like, you'll still have Caruso and Hartenstein around at this point. In a few years' time, that could change. Their roster could look totally different around those guys, as well as other younger players in their farm system through the G League, and even some of the current players that are on their bench right now may start to get a little better. You might have Topic, who was a draft and stash player. He is literally the first player in NBA history to win a championship despite not even playing in a single game in the NBA. He's set to come over to the league officially soon after his injury. And if he can develop into a solid point guard, that gives them even more ammo as a squad to utilize. They are only getting better. They're younger, unproven talent in these three as well. As I stated, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as of July 12th, just entered his prime. But we haven't even seen him in that element on the NBA court yet. And Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are going to continue to develop and get better and improved games with age. They are already ahead of the curve in so many facets. And they got the job done this early. This core is set up for success. And the front office also feels as though no matter what else is happening around them, these three players are at the very least going to keep them in the running for the foreseeable future, no matter what. And that's when you know you've done your job as a front office member. That's when you know. You can dole out all of these contracts and not even have any worry in the world about it hurting you. You are very sure of the talent that you've acquired to this point. And this is just the surface of their potential. They haven't even revealed their full selves yet as NBA talent. It's just insane work. The Bucks would waive Vasilije Micic last week. I can't blame them. But it just continues on and on and on and on and on. He's just going to continue to get passed around. Again, I can't blame them. Because it's as I detailed when I covered the initial trade involving him, his efficiency is some of the worst in the league. And you're banking on him, if you're the Bucks, being able in that moment to assume the role of Damian Lillard on a smaller scale to try and keep that point guard unit intact, when he can't even execute efficiently on his own standing on the court. It just wasn't going to work out. So from their standpoint, at least the Bucks recognize that. And they already have a couple of solid guys that they do believe could take on that role in a much better way, while having way more upside at this point because of just how young they both are. Ryan Rollins and Kevin Porter Jr., although they do have their collective issues, are highly valued in that system already, partially due to their youth. And even still, even with all that being said, they've produced in far better ways than Vasilije Micic ever has. So if you can get that kind of work from their end on cheaper deals and with more room to work with because of their age, there's no need for Micic to be in your locker room at that point. James Jones, the former Suns general manager, would become the NBA's executive vice president of basketball operations last week. And that is huge news for him. What progression on his end for him to be a sort of role player in the NBA for years. Like I remember him being on the same team as LeBron, and he spent a few different years around a few different teams. Like I did not know that he was a Pacer, but I do remember him as a Phoenix Sun. And I do remember him being on the Heat and the Cavs as well in those later years. He also spent time with the Blazers for a season. He'd been around the block. In his playing career, he was a very, very solid shooter. Like, if you asked him to step in for you and make a shot, he'd get it done pretty much 40% of the time. And he finished his playing career with the same field goal percentage as 3-point percentage. Like, that's all he had to do, and it eventually paid off for him as he won 3 NBA championships in all those stops. Then he hung up his career in 2017 and transitioned into front office roles. Broke through for the Suns, was regarded as one of the better general managers in the league, and his work behind the scenes eventually got the Suns to reach the NBA Finals, even though they ultimately lost to the Bucks in 6 games due to the Giannis masterclass in that entire series. It has been downhill from there. And, yes, James Jones was certainly in control of making these moves, but at the same time, ownership definitely had their say. And even coaches at the time, like Monty Williams, like Frank Vogel, like Mike Budenholzer, also had some voices in making these deals happen. Unfortunately, not every single one of them has panned out to this point. And I suppose that these individuals were just, I don't know. Like, I really don't know their thought process at the time. But it felt like James Jones in this sequence was going to be open to other possibilities. Not necessarily saying that the owners were thinking about moving on from him potentially or like letting him go. But they had to assume that change was coming on his end. Because I don't know if he wanted to personally continue dealing with this stuff the entire time. He's never said that personally, though, and you got to give him credit. Like, through it all, he's expressed loyalty more often than not with that Suns organization. So it looked like he was going to stick around at least. But getting elevated to that kind of position on a league-wide scale is just not something that you can pass up. Like, he's literally started from the ground up when it comes to assuming these responsibilities in the NBA landscape. And having that responsibility now is kind of the pinnacle for anyone trying to manage a team or manage a league. So when that opportunity came calling, he decided to go with it. And once more, I think it's a smart move. Like, he is a person who is known to make calculated decisions. And, you know, when everything is in order, those things tend to pay off more often than not. So I have faith that he would do tremendously well in this spot. And although the Suns, again, we're probably trying to hold on to his services, I think they understand as well that the league as a whole is going to be in pretty good hands in this department with him running the show. I'm not even going to worry about talking about this in full on this video or this channel right here. But if you've heard anything about Ben McLemore in the past week and some change, it's fucking horrible. It's horrible. All I'm going to say is that man is now going to serve 8 years in Oregon State Prison for some of the most despicable shit an individual could do to another. In any sense. It's just fucking disgusting. Like I said, like I'm not even gonna get into what it is. If you just search up the name, you will probably see multiple headlines talking about it. Like, when you have players in any sense of the imagination thinking that they're above the law and above, I guess, standard norms of society, it's never a good mix. And in situations like that, you see it lead to a number of different scenarios. I mean, it could deal with, potential DUIs. It could deal with situations in the past. Like, there was like a scenario in the NFL where this person, I think Sam Hurd, I've watched multiple videos on that. This man was literally living a double life and thought that he was invincible. He eventually got his due. Right? It can involve potential robberies and things like that. Again, all of these crimes all over the place, stemming from situations where some of these athletes, and I guess just a number of different people in higher standing in general, think that they are above others. And rather than try to uplift the people surrounding them, in these cases, they will do whatever they can, whether intentionally or inadvertently, to keep them down. And this is one of those very extreme cases where it's just like, damn, bro. What could have possibly made you even think of doing that, let alone going out and committing that crime? It's unspeakable stuff. And now that person, this victim in this situation, is going to be affected for the rest of their life. But also from Macklemore's perspective as well, because I was watching a video from Microphone as well. This guy had the roughest upbringing imaginable. We talk about people living in poverty. He was dirt poor. And his family was barely getting by in Missouri. And yet he still managed to work his way out of that, get himself into the NBA, and get himself a nice amount of wealth to provide for himself and his family. And from the basketball sense, he was a free agent. He wasn't signed with any team. But at the very least, there was still always a chance that he could come back and contribute for another contender while being a pretty solid spacer of the floor. Yet you still waste that opportunity, and it's now completely gone. His reputation as a player who most recently spent time in Portland and was living there, especially when this particular incident in question happened, his reputation to those who know him, to those who were familiar with him in that area, and from all of those who encountered him throughout his life and got to know him pretty well, is forever soiled after some shit like that. Straight up. There would be news that Frank Layden, the former coach and general manager of the Jazz in the early 80s, would pass away at the age of 93. It was definitely unfortunate, and you're definitely doing as best as you can if you were a person that knew him or you were a person that had some sort of connection to him to honor him. They've certainly expressed their condolences to his family, and the same here, as well, while also celebrating his life. The Jazz have played multiple Summer League games to this point, and they've been wearing shirts commemorating Frank Layden's life, and it's certainly well-deserved. He's obviously a person who was highly responsible for some of the early success the Jazz had during this time. He was the general manager at a time when the front office drafted both Karl Malone and John Stockton, and oversaw the team as a general manager while the Jazz were making some of their deeper postseason runs to the NBA Finals in the late 90s as well. According to this article here, Layden remained in the Salt Lake City area after leaving coaching and earned the Chuck Daly Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019, end quote. Because I guess some of the greatest coaches have a burning desire to continue to do so, even when they stop at the largest scale in the NBA. They try to keep it going elsewhere, because for them, they just love to teach and pass down these kinds of info to the next generation of potential players and even coaches, mentoring other younger individuals trying to involve themselves in sports management and kind of paving the way for them as well. Like, think about this. As this quote says right here, Layden stepped away from coaching early in the 1988-89 season and was replaced by future Hall of Famer Jerry Sloan. End quote. Also, another individual very integral to the history of the Jazz who also had untimely passed earlier in the decade. So for the Jazz to have to deal with that across multiple years is certainly heartbreaking when you do think about it. But hey, with Layden being a good head coach, Jerry Sloan was also a very, very great head coach. So the continuity in that time was pretty elite and has to be respected. And a lot of that has to do with what Layden was doing at the time. So, again, there's certainly a lot to celebrate when it comes to Layden. Obviously, you're going to have people grieving over this. This is not something that they are going to, be able to bypass those. It's impossible to suggest that would happen. But he definitely had a long and successful life. 93 years old. He was born in 1932, and he was able to live and breathe on this earth for that long. That's something special, man. The Pelicans would sign Herb Jones to a 3-year, $68 million deal. I think it's well deserved. And honestly, if things were to have gone a certain way last season, I think he would have gotten a little bit more money even. Which is crazy to say. When Herbert Jones is on the court, even though he was one of the older players to come out of the 21 draft class, he has been nothing short of one of the best 3-and-D players in the league. And certainly one of the best, if not the best at a time, wing defender in the league. There's a reason why he was a member of the all-defensive first team in the NBA in the 23-24 season, and also 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting that year. I have no doubt that if he was fully healthy last season, he would have gotten that placement again. And again, when we talk about players like Lucian Dort and Jalen Williams, for example, even though they had spectacular seasons last year, again, the lack of players like a Wembanyama, like a Herbert Jones on that specific list for those teams due to their injuries and not meeting the minimum games requirement certainly altered things a little bit. So while those guys are good defenders in their own right, when Herbert Jones is back this season, he's going to make it very difficult for those guys to repeat in those same spots. That's how intense of a defender he is. Like, any ball handler in the league will have nightmares trying to go up against Herbert Jones. His on-ball pressure is just, it's too damn good. And then he's got the length as well to continue to slither and slip around different screen techniques that teams will try to implement. Like, that doesn't matter to him. He's going to find ways to get around you and then lock your best player down on a night-to-night basis. And the Pelicans continue to foster a lineup of very talented wing players. Obviously, Herbert Jones, I'm mentioning now, but look at what Trey Murphy III did as well. He also had a season hampered by injuries, but emerged as one of their core scorers while also being a great defender in his own right. And that helps the Pelicans a ton, given what they need to do, and also having that space cleared up of getting guys like McCollum and Ingram out of there. Now these younger guys can flourish in an even greater way. So I'm excited to see what Herbert Jones can put together next season. The Wizards would sign Marvin Bagley III to a 1-year deal. I don't really know what it is that they see in him at this point of time. He spent 2 half seasons with them over the past 2 years. Not even that fully. And while he did have a strong outing in the 23-24 tenure after the trade deadline, in 24-25, he averaged just 4.9 points per game with them while starting just 1 game. He is a player who is on the younger side, and yet for that team, him being 26 years old already makes him one of the older players on that squad. And the Kings drafted him early, all those years ago, just before Luka Doncic got taken, only for him to not flourish into much of anything with that team. Sure, he had the numbers, but he just was not good. And he still has yet to have a complete NBA season. And he's nearing his prime. So he essentially is going to be what he is at this point. I genuinely don't know what the Wizards are trying to do here. Maybe they see this as a Kelly Olynyk replacement, but I don't know why you would exactly go for that. Why would you want to punt on a player in Olynyk who can certainly shoot the 3 ball much better than Marvin Bagley III ever has? I don't get that. Now, at the same time, as I am seeing here, your only centers to this point aren't Alex Saw, even though he technically plays the forward, and I guess Rashawn Holmes appears to still be with the team, but even he's a little small for a center at this point of time in the NBA landscape. And even then, that leaves you with just 2 guys in that front court. So to add a third on a short-term deal is not that bad when thinking about it. But they think Marvin Bagley III is set to come in and be a game wrecker for them. I can't imagine that he will. He has never shown it. So why should I believe anything different? The Pacers would sign Isaiah Jackson to a 3-year, $21 million deal. I like the move. I have nothing more to say about it. I like the move. They have him listed at center, even though he plays a lot of 4 from what I've seen in past Pacers games involving him. And he has been a solid bench contributor for them. He's got career averages of 7.2 points per game with 4.3 rebounds per game on 59.5% shooting. And he gives them an element of very good defense and rim protection as well, while also being a nice physical presence to have on the offensive glass as well, and securing timely rebounds, getting up efficient shots consistently. And he was on pace to do a lot of the same stuff last year, but he was severely limited. He played in just 5 games and then was out for the rest of the season. That would have changed things completely for the Pacers. I can't play the shoulda, woulda, coulda game. But at the same time, to have a legitimate center who could hold down the fort and keep things in order, like Isaiah Jackson, would have prevented them from even needing to go out and get guys like Tony Bradley or Thomas Bryant in the first place, which could have changed the entire course of the season, if you do think about it. So knowing that he can provide that for them, to have him re-sign for this period is not terrible, to say the least. Like, the Pacers will certainly embrace that. And with that, too, now you're kind of bolstering your front court at that position. Now you have Jackson, you have Wiseman, and you have Huff. Jackson, given how he has played, because of the uncertainty that those two guys have in their durability, even though I am literally seeing that Jackson himself missed the rest of the season last year after appearing in just the first 5. That could scare you a little bit. But at the same time, his consistency in that stretch does give him the upper hand. And with already being exposed to the Rick Carlisle offense during this time, he knows the offense much better than either of those two do at this point. So honestly, given this signing, I would expect Isaiah Jackson to be a starter. I would expect him to get even more opportunities than he ever has. For as consistent as he has been, obviously, Miles Turner was the unquestioned starter, and he had just spot starts through most of his career to this point. Just 15 starts in 21, 12 in 22, 3 in 23, and even just 1 last year. And Isaiah Jackson that can get more opportunities in this offense is going to take a pretty sizable leap. And the team will need it. So you certainly don't have much of a problem with that one at all. The Grizzlies, according to Shams Charania, are set to buy out Cole Anthony, and he would be rerouted to Milwaukee. From their perspective, the Bucks, because I do get why the Grizzlies would buy him out at this point. For the Bucks, though, it just makes things even more interesting off the bench. Because Cole Anthony is not a player that can work off the ball. And honestly, I can't say that Kevin Porter Jr. is that great off the ball either. He never has been. So is that bench unit, is that bench backcourt really going to work out all that well? I mean, if this is the case and he is set to actually go to Milwaukee, I mean, I guess we'll find out. But as it stands right now, I don't know if I have the most confidence in this move for them. Fred VanVleet would be elected as the next president of the NBPA. G.J. McCollum was there previously serving in that role, and now Fred VanVleet will be the president for at least the next 4 years of this association, with CBAs having a 7-year distance now after the last one was signed. And they're apparently, according to this article from the Bleacher Report, is apparently an opt-out clause. Yeah, okay. As this quote says here, The deal started with the 23-24 season and includes an opt-out after the 6th year of the deal in 2028-29. Should the NBA and the NBPA decide to opt out before the 2029-30 season, VanVleet could be leading the union's negotiations on the next year during the final year of his term. End quote. So, certainly VanVleet will be responsible for a few different initiatives that take place during this time. But when it comes to collective bargaining, there's a good chance that he doesn't even really get to take on that aspect of the job at all. But to have VanVleet being the voice of the players is actually very solid. You know, he will have his moments where he talks shit and gets salty and things like that. But for the most part, he is a player that has very redeemable qualities about himself and is generally respected by other NBA players. So it wouldn't be hard to side with him and listen to him in different circumstances if you're one of his counterparts. He's definitely relatable in that regard. And that's what you're shooting for. I mean, CJ McCollum had the similar qualities about him. You don't want a player who is just constantly disrespected or being disrespectful towards others. Because how are you in that case going to be able to effectively come together and reach true union when it comes to talking about these different agreements and negotiation tactics behind the scenes to other members of the NBA? You certainly wish him all the best in that role, because it can provide you with a good amount of leverage in some cases, and it certainly requires a lot as well. After the signing of the 11-year, $77 billion mega deal between ESPN, Amazon, and NBC, we were wondering who exactly they would hire to cover the NBA on Prime in these cases. And as of last week, we did begin to get a little more clarity as to who is going to be handling these operations here. To start things out, the first couple of names on this particular list would be Ian Eagle and Kevin Harlan, both handling play-by-play responsibilities. I assume that, this could be an A and B team thing, but at the same time, when it comes to those two, it's going to be a matter of availability. And just to have both of them on the same team is in and of itself a great move on the part of Prom here. I mean, we're talking about two of the greatest and most widely recognized, most well-renowned sports broadcasters in history, in multiple sports. Obviously, they've done their damage in the NBA with TNT for decades to this point, the both of them. And Ian Eagle also did work with, I think, the Nets on Yes Network. So they certainly have a ton of experience, and they are going to be leading their respective broadcasts without hesitation. Let's just get that straight. Both of them as well have also handled broadcasting in football for decades now. And the availability for some of their games could be conflicting, because there may be nights where they have to do NFL coverage instead of tracking NBA games. And that will certainly come into play during the height of the NFL season. So, especially during that time, I guess in the months of October, November, and December. When we get into January and February, maybe not so, because all of the networks who cover the NFL during this time are going to have their A-listers on for the most part. And while that might include some package with Harlan or Eagle at the same time, they're going to stress availability then as well. And it feels like they would be favoring more towards those who have already been there rather than have Harlan and Eagle continue to fluctuate between NBA game and an NFL game. Wouldn't make a lot of sense. But during the height of the season, you can imagine that this would continue. And at the end of the day, they've earned that right to continue to flip-flop if they so choose. No matter what, you know that when they're on these games, you're going to get elite commentary. So it's just going to be what it is. But it seems like, again, it could be an A and B team thing. But it could also come down to whether or not they're going to be able to make it out there for specific games. Because in terms of scheduling, we also don't know that for Prime right now, and that would give us even more information as to how they'd operate when it comes to broadcasting. Because you have multiple guys for play-by-play here, but exactly how many games are you going to be covering on a night-to-night basis? I think there was an initial report that stated that they would handle like 66 games throughout the season. But how many on a daily or weekly basis are you going to be covering? And how many bodies do you need on site for each of those games? That'll determine how this whole thing runs. And, you know, it's dependent on a lot of things right now, for sure. But if they do attack this a certain way, it seems as though they do have some backup plans when it comes to the element of availability. Because for their next two play-by-play men listed here, they would have Michael Grady from ESPN and Eric Collins from the infamous Charlotte Hornets broadcasts on a per-night basis. Both of these guys do bring a lot of personality. I think Eric Collins is more well-known through the general sense. It's been a development for years now. Not just with him being the Hornets broadcaster, but he also did previous work with Fox Sports back in the day, back when NBA coverage was there. So he certainly has experience in this realm himself. Michael Grady, from my understanding, is a bit of a newer addition to the sports broadcasting realm. And he was kind of like a C-team, D-team guy for ESPN. But at the same time, in the games that I watched with him broadcasting, he did pretty well himself. He was on a couple, for like the past couple years, I think, ESPN had at least a game for like a Black History Month broadcast. And he was part of the very first all African American broadcast in ESPN history, and I think maybe in general TV history. So there's certainly something to that as well. It's just been a completely uphill climb for him since he's gotten in there, and he's done nothing but kill it. So I can imagine that he'd do the same thing at Prime. And honestly, he would get a much better opportunity there at this time. So that is just another solid move. As for game analysts or color commentators, they have 3 listed here, all with tremendous amounts of experience. Stan Van Gundy from TNT, Brent Barry also from TNT, and Del Curry from the Hornets broadcast. I'm interested to hear a little bit more from Del Curry. He's had that experience, but when it comes to watching games involving him on color commentary, I just haven't come across them, you know. I'm nowhere near North Carolina, so I'm not going to be able to hear his specific broadcast specifically. But as a very well-versed player in his time, and also the father of one of the best players in NBA history, you can imagine that he is going to have a lot to say when it comes to breaking down the intricacies of an NBA game. So I'm certainly here for that. Van Gundy and Brent Barry obviously have decades of experience in their own right as well. As a former player in Brent Barry and as a former coach in Van Gundy. And though I talk shit about how consistently Van Gundy complains about things, both of the Van Gundys actually, at the same time, he's been damn consistent at his job. And it was going to be interesting to see where he ended up after the rights to TNT were over with. And at the very least, he now has a new home here. So that's certainly something to be excited for. And then for sideline reporters, you have Cassidy Hubbarth from ESPN, Allie Clifton, and Christina Pink from Fox as well. So they're stacking things up for sure. And I think more names are going to be unveiled as we get closer and closer to the NBA season. But hey, they're gonna try their hardest to make the experience for the general viewer a very fun time. And that's what it's all about when it comes to dealing with entertainment in this sense. Earlier today, the Cavs would extend President Koby Altman until the 29-30 season. And again, under his tenure, they have found recent success in terms of playoff contention, but obviously they have got to do everything in their power to get over the hump and actually make a conference finals. Then potentially reach an NBA final setting. That's just been the biggest roadblock for them to this point. But they're at least expressing faith that Altman can eventually help this team in his own way to reach those milestones in the near future. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.